I read terrible things. I would sit and I think to myself, well, I wonder if they went through this situation, how they would feel about making a decision to go to one school.
That's Leon McQuay II. His son,
Leon McQuay III,
was a 6th-round draft choice by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2017 NFL Draft. But before that, he was a prized recruit from Tampa, Florida.
Leon McQuay III was a 5-star blue-chip defensive back. Eventually, he took his talents west to USC. As you might have guessed, the recruiting process was a process that most fans won't ever know.
I wish that they could do it themselves. Go through the whole process as far as from start to finish, and then making a decision to go to a particular school. If they could experience that, they'd have a totally different outlook on some of the stuff that they put on those blogs, man.
Recruiting is the lifeblood of college football, but it's also a bit of a mystery. That process gets distorted through the lens of social media and message boards and sensationalized tales of boosters and $100 handshakes. What really goes on behind the scenes?
Let's find out.
From the Solid Verbal, this is a special production. This is how recruiting works. I'm Ty Hildenbrandt. He's Dan Rubenstein.
Hey, hello.
Today, we want to talk about the ins and outs of recruiting. And we know not everything is above board. But if only for this one exercise, let's focus on the real nuts and bolts from the player, parent, coach, and media angles.
Recruiting is a matter of priority on many fronts. If you're a coach, how do you choose to build your program? If you're a reporter, how do you accurately cover teenagers? If you're a player, what program makes the most sense for your future? We could ask a million questions, but let's start here. If you're a parent, how do you guide your son through the process?
As a parent, you want to do more listening than talking. You want to take notes. You want to, again, figure out what that institution is trying to get out of your kid, what the expectations are, and ride the wave.
You've already met Leon McQuay II. In addition to being a father to multiple high-level athletes, he's also a 7-on-7 coach in the Tampa area.
It's turning into, a business, and I think parents need to understand the ins and outs of the business.
Leon isn't wrong. College football as a whole is more a business now than ever before. Every aspect of the game has gotten more coverage. High school games, recruiting camps, even announcement ceremonies have quickly become a pretty big deal. Parents are often caught in the middle.
With coaches, they all want the same thing. Right? That's the ultimate result, is to get your kid. What I would listen for is, if they're concerned about him graduating. A lot of coaches now are preaching 3 and out, leaving early for the league. If someone's selling you that, you want to go the other way. And I've seen where it's starting to turn with the parents are asking for offers. That's a no-no.
Okay, so you don't want to ask for offers, but I think I get it.
It's clearly an emotional time. I asked Lindsey Theory from the LA Times to break down how parents deal with the recruiting process.
Well, I think there's 4 different types of parents. There's the parent you never see. There's the parent you see, but really sticks to themselves. And I would say that's a pretty big majority. There's the parent that is just totally normal, talks to every reporter, says hi, hello, how are you? normal conversation. And then there's the parent, which I would say is probably about 25% of the parents are the parents who come up to you, wonder when you're going to write about their child, why you haven't written about their child lately, and want to talk to you about their child's star rating and ranking and how their child's better than that other child. And did you see that catch? And did you see that catch? And it's like, I saw the catch.
Lindsey is a veteran of the recruiting beat.
For the recruiting world, I mostly tracked recruits who were interested or had interest from USC, University of Southern California. And my job really was to, make contact with those recruits, find out why they liked SC, find out why they didn't like SC. And that really kind of expanded into a whole kind of West Coast role because a lot of kids out here obviously aren't just getting recruited by the Trojans. And in order to know where they stood with the Trojans, you had to know where they also stood with all the other programs. So I spent about 5 years going to 7-on-7 camps or tournaments every weekend, and during the high school season, going to high school games on Friday nights. Really, really fun existence there.
She also worked closely with Brandon Huffman, longtime friend of the podcast.
Brandon is the national college football editor for 24/7 Sports. He's been a guest on this show for as far back as I can remember, and there isn't anyone out there who knows more about recruiting than him. So he said, shoot us straight. What's the one bit of advice you have for parents who are going through the recruiting process?
For me, I've been doing this for 15, 16 classes now. And generally, as a rule, the second a parent starts ripping another recruit to me to try to pump up their own, I've lost all interest. You basically have made your son out to be the next Joe Montana, the next Walter Payton, the next Jerry Rice, because you've now taken a kid who's very talented, who's got a lot of ability, and you try to minimize his ability to say your son was that much better. And so the bad parents are the one that go out of their way to rip every other recruit. And believe me, that happens on a daily basis.
Ty, it's easy to understand how parents could get a bit overbearing. There's a lot at stake, a scholarship, a football career, maybe a lot of money.
Sure, but Dan, you know the source of all recruiting evils, don't you? They're the stars.
Stars, Ty, the stars.
It's the stars, Dan. When recruiting services learn about a player, they assign him a star rating. 5 stars for the cream of the crop, 2 stars if you could probably play somewhere on the college level. It's an arbitrary system, but it drives people out of their minds.
The thing is, even though it's not a perfect system, it does end up working out. Here's Bud Elliott, recruiting editor for SB Nation.
I always tell people, look, I think rankings at the end of the day are really good, especially at the end of the cycle. They're in fact pretty predictive, and I would take them over almost any kind of other prediction method out there on the whole, especially at the upper bounds. But early on, rankings are a mess. They exist in early March, basically only to give context to articles that are being put out for subscribers. They're not. I'm not saying they're not intended to be accurate, but they're so incomplete at that point. And look, we use them. We say, hey, this kid's a 3-star as of now, and I try my best to put currently rated a 3-star because I know it'll probably change.
So we'll hear more from Bud in a few minutes, but let's talk a little bit more about the stars with Brandon Huffman. What exactly does it mean if you're, say, a 2-star prospect?
To us, a 2-star is a kid that has the ability to play at the FBS level, whether it's he's gotten a ton of offers, whether he's just gotten one offer. It's a kid that we identify and say, at minimum, this kid could play in a group of 5 school or at a service academy. We think their skill set is there. We think that there's some upside there, but we think at minimum 2-star means we think you are at minimum an FBS level prospect.
Interesting. What about 3 stars?
And 3-star is probably the most maligned star. We don't think you can't play college football if you're a 3-star. What it means is in a lot of cases, you might not have just the right height, the right size, the right speed, the right position to be an early impact, long time impact guy. You might be a guy that it's going to take some time to develop. There's some skill there, but it's not going to be until your junior or senior we really expect you to be an impact guy. I think one guy that, there's a lot of talk about, well, he was only a 3-star coming out of high school, was Eric Kendricks. There's a guy that, he won the Buckus Award. Eric Kendricks, had to bide his time. He was a little bit of an undersized linebacker coming out of high school, and his brother Michael is the same way, undersized, but it was their junior and senior years, like you expect. These are guys that maybe their first 2 years, they're just still finding their way. They're not necessarily the early impact guys.
And 4-stars?
That's a 4-star player, is a guy who's going to make an early impact. And he may not come in and be, the immediate absolute superstar from the day he steps foot on campus, but he's going to challenge for playing time as a true freshman or a redshirt freshman. Maybe he's a quarterback who's going to a school that's got a senior, but a guy that we think is going to make an early impact, be an all-conference caliber player right off the bat, and contend for All-American honors pretty early on in his career.
Let's close it out. 5 stars.
The 5-star is the one who, the second he steps foot on that campus, he's not only contending for the starting job, but he's contending for potentially the best player on your team. He's a difference maker type of recruit. He's not only going to be a big-time contributor to a team, but he's going to make the other players around him that much better. A guy like a Rashawn Gary, who you see him at the opening going into his junior year, going against senior linemen, and he was dominant against them. So these are the guys that it's not going to be a big jump for them once they get to college. They're going to be able to handle guys 3-4 years older than them, lining up across from them, and they're causing them problems, and they're making an early impact, and they're making a difference in games. These are guys that we think they're going to be gone from college in 3 years because they're going to the NFL. Their talent is that evident.
In other words, you want more 4 and 5 stars than 2 and 3s, but this is still a really weird relative measure. So don't take it too seriously.
That sounds right. But star ratings do have a huge impact. At the end of the day, they're pretty good, and you could make the case that they fuel the entire multi-million-dollar media industry built around recruiting. Let's throw it back to Bud for more.
You are acquiring information on kids, and because it's sort of a proprietary niche market, you are able to sell that information at a premium price, so actually a subscription model. And it's one of the few subscription model businesses other than porn that actually works. Literally what you say is the truth, regardless of whether it is or not, because people don't know. People are not at these recruit camps. You are kind of the gatekeeper of the information, and enough people who are that big a diehard will pay to read that.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Star ratings from the outside are the bedrock on which the entire recruiting world operates. Parents email about it. A cottage industry is built upon it. And coaches will say that they don't, but they absolutely care.
And if anyone says they don't, it's a lie. If there's anybody who doesn't, maybe it's the service academies, because they don't typically put their list out of who signed, because their recruiting process is so much different. But just about every college coach cares. If they didn't, they wouldn't have a signing day press conference. They wouldn't have the press release that includes what their kids were ranked in that class, what Scout had them, what Rivals had them, what 24/7 had them, what ESPN. That wouldn't show up in press releases if they didn't care. You also would see less and less college coaches calling to complain about how we have one of their players ranked too low, because a lot of these coaches have bonuses tied into where the recruiting classes finish, where maybe some of these coaches aren't the greatest talent developers, they're not the great X's and O's guys, but they're fantastic recruiters, and that's why they're on that staff. They've got bonuses tied in. If we finish the top 40 class, we get X amount of dollars. I remember when Mike Loxley was hired at Maryland a few years ago as an assistant coach, the Baltimore Sun wrote an article about what his bonuses were if he finished the top 40 class on Scout, if he finished with the top 40 class on Rivals. And there was monetary gain for him if those classes were ranked high. Well, the only way those classes could be ranked high is if those players had some shiny stars next to their name. So more and more college coaches have recruiting bonuses based on where their class is going to finish. And so when you bring money into the situation, all of a sudden a lot of coaches are caring about those stars and those rankings.
Dan, we asked Lindsey Theory about this too. And she told us that coaches follow the recruiting beat like no other. It actually caught her by surprise.
This is probably the most fascinating part of recruiting to me was, the coaches really anymore, who knows what coaches in everyday circumstance just playing the sport if they need to talk to reporters, right? I mean, they have their own avenues with their own school websites and whatnot. But when it comes to recruiting, coaches need reporters, because basically the kids, the recruits, I should say, when a coach calls them, the recruits will tell that coach a lot of the time everything that coach wants to hear. Coach, I love you. I love your school. I'm so interested. You're the only one I'm talking to, whatever, so on and so forth. However, when the kid talks to a reporter, they also are smart enough to know that all the coaches are going to be reading that. So they don't want to tell me, the reporter, that they're only talking to SC, because what if they're also talking to UCLA and they're also talking to Oregon and Washington, whatever. So the coaches love talking to the recruiting reporters because they get more of the truth there, because the kids will tell us more of the truth, because we don't have a horse in the race. So it was really interesting how much contact there is between recruiting reporters and coaches.
A symbiotic relationship. That's how Lindsey describes it.
Dan, does this surprise you at all?
Not really. Recruiting is a game just like actual football is. Coaches scout however they have to. It's just the nature of the beast. One thing I did ask, though, was whether reporters ever get a little too close to the action.
A little too close? What do you mean?
Well, who does a lot of the recruiting reporting?
Oh, you mean like actual team sites, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I see.
Do those reporters ever get in on the game and do a little of their own recruiting? Lindsey said it happens, but not nearly enough to be actually controversial.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, because a lot of these people who started these sites, they started them because they were fans of the school, right? Mm-hmm. And they want their business to do well. Now, have I ever seen a reporter just go hard and pitch a school? No, I've never seen that firsthand. I've definitely heard about it, but I've never seen it. But there definitely is a way when reporters who cover a site or a team, keep in mind they also want to keep on the good side of the staff, where they just kind of have this way of talking very favorably, about whatever school it is they're covering, and asking the kid questions and phrasing them in a way that just are so favorable to the school, where it's not just, hey, what are your favorite schools? It's like, hey, so UCLA or USC or Washington, they're really building their program up, and they're doing this, that, and in these new stadiums, don't you love that? And it's like, okay, that's kind of a leading question, right?
So what have we learned? Well, for one, parents can get a little too aggressive during the process. Brandon Huffman says that's not a good idea. The star rating system isn't perfect, but it's better than you might think. We know what the different star ratings stand for, that an industry has popped up around them, and that coaches are definitely lurking on your favorite message boards.
Yeah, my favorite user is Def Not Urban Meyer 4867.
Always seemed a little suspicious, right? What next?
This is the part that blew me away the most. There's no doubt that recruiting is an important element for any program, but most people don't know the infrastructure required to compete for the best recruits.
Infrastructure. What do you mean by infrastructure?
Well,
who's going to show the kid around when he gets on campus? Golf carts with rims on them, and fancy painted logos, and the ability to spend money to be flashy and impress recruits, because that first impression matters so much. You have your on-campus director of recruiting, you have your in-house recruiting guy, you have your recruiting coordinator, your communications department, your social media department, right? I know Clemson kind of set the bar there for a while, and it paid good dividends for them. The ability to produce a lot of graphics on social media, and also the ability to track the happenings of the recruiting cycle, right? Like some of these schools have people whose sole job essentially is just to follow a couple hundred kids on social media, see what they're saying, learn who they are, see when they say stuff that the kids think's an inside joke. Well, the staff actually gets it too.
Dan, that's insane.
And there's so much more. We could have talked forever about the support staff that makes all of this work, but we did want to get into the actual strategy of recruiting players. How do you do that? What's the secret?
Of course, in the end, the kid is going to make the decision, but there's usually somebody who's going to have an outsized influence on helping him make the decision. So is that mom? Is it dad? Is it grandma or grandpa? Or, his brother or uncle or cousin. Maybe it's the high school coach. Maybe it's the 7-on-7 coach or somebody in his community. To win big-time recruiting battles, you have to win the kid, but you also have to win the influencer or the decision maker. So I think that's one of the first steps that all great recruiters are able to do. They're able to hone in on, hey, maybe I need to get good with that trainer, right? In addition to just getting in good with the kid.
So, sidebar.
Yeah.
I am struck by how similar all this sounds to the time I bought my last car. A little bit of an obsequious quality to all this, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of the game. Bud says the process is long enough that most of the sleaze gets boiled off, but coaches still have to play their cards pretty close to the vest.
This is generally a pretty long process, so it's hard to carry out just fantastical lies over the course of 12 months, right? Other coaches are going to get wind of what you're saying, and they're going to try to rebut some of the stuff that you're presenting to the recruit. So you have to be able to present a truthful argument and stretch it some, but you can't just completely lie to the kid in most situations. Sometimes it works, and it's unfortunate, but you have to be sort of on the edge of honest, and you have to importantly make sure that the kid trusts you. And in that regard, a lot of it really is relationship building. You have to build the relationship that the kid can trust you, can be in your program for the next 3 or 4 years. And not only is that important with the kid, but you've heard the phrase before, win mom. You got to win the moms. They have to trust that you're going to take care of their young man the best you can when she finally gives him the okay to go away from home for school. And that's especially true if you're trying to do more long distance type recruiting. If you're, let's say, a school in the Pacific Northwest trying to pull a kid out of Florida, you go 2,000-3,000 miles away, that's a big deal. So you have to really establish good relationships. You have to establish trust. You have to be a good salesperson, and then you have to be able to identify who else is going to help make the decision other than the young man.
The other variables are recruits that have already committed. Bud said that coaches will sometimes, send them graphics and tips. Stuff that might not be kosher coming from a coach. Programs do whatever they can to leverage every available asset, including commits that can recruit other commits. Basically, anything that they can use to their advantage, they will.
And sometimes, Ty, that includes talking down the competition. In the college football world, negative recruiting is the practice of essentially using another program's deficiencies to your advantage. Sometimes these are real, sometimes they're kind of real, and on rare occasion, clutch those pearls, Ty, they're just flat out made up.
So the one that comes to mind right away is Lane Kiffin telling Alshon Jeffrey,
Super Bowl champion Alshon Jeffrey,
that he'd end up pumping gas if he went to school at South Carolina. That would qualify here, yes?
There's a whole spectrum of pitches that teams and recruits need to be ready for.
A big part of that is anticipating sort of the negative volleys that are going to come from other programs. Will another program try to talk about something that maybe your school is deficient in? You really have to keep track of your negative recruiting foes, I think. And everybody says they don't negatively recruit. And to some extent, everybody does, whether that's like out and out lying about another program or whether that's comparative type recruiting. But I think a lot of it is anticipating and combating the likely pitches that other programs are going to try to use to get a kid to flip from you.
Did Bud provide any examples of how this actually goes down in the real world?
Oh, yeah, he did. In a lot of cases, it's just more subtle than fans might think.
I'd say number one is probably depth chart, right? Hey, look at all these guys the school has signed. You're not going to play there early. Early playing time is a big deal to kids. Whether or not it should be, some of them actually should probably sit in redshirt and develop a little bit, but they all seem to want early playing time, and that makes sense because they've all been studs pretty much at every level they've played at so far in their career. So early playing time, negative recruiting, hey, you can play here a lot more early and you can play there. The other thing with the depth chart, which is kind of a subset of it, is, hey, did you know they're also recruiting this kid at your position? And they're not really done. They may have told you you're going to be the only running back they take in the class, but we know for a fact they're after this kid too, because we're fighting this school for this other kid as well. That type of thing. Coaches leaving, like speculation like that. Hey, he's not going to be there for more than another year. So who are you really signing with? That's one. Maybe lack of success at a position compared to another school. That's certainly one. But that's to me, that third one is more comparative recruiting, right? You're just comparing your track record compared to another school. And if it's better, you should highlight the differences, because that's what you do in any sort of sales type thing.
Ty, there's a tendency to hear a term like negative recruiting and immediately think of the super negative. Sometimes it does go there. Most of the time it doesn't.
It really does seem more comparative than negative in a lot of cases. And I guess nobody should be fully surprised by that, because a recruiting pitch is essentially a sales pitch.
That sounds right. And it all speaks to a larger point that you find in all processes, whether it's recruiting or podcasting. Eventually, if something is big or important enough, a special, we'll say, vocabulary forms around it.
A committable offer, and this is a term that is sort of recently come to prominence. Committable offer is when a school offers you and they're actually willing to accept that commitment from you currently. A non-committable offer is kind of some nonsense, but honestly, all schools pull this, or the vast majority of ones that recruit well do it. And it's like, hey, you have an offer from us pending you coming up to camp and impressing and confirming that what you show on film is what you really do in person, or pending us having a spot for you.
Wow. Oh, okay. How about some terms we're more familiar with, but maybe don't fully understand?
Unofficial visits, you can do a lot of the things that you can do on an official visit, except you have to pay for it. So for an official visit, right, you go, not only does the school pay for you, but it gets to pay for your parents, which is good. As opposed to unofficial, everybody's got to pay for themselves, and then you can kind of visit unofficially whenever. You'll go. You'll get on campus. You'll probably meet with your area coach and your recruiting coordinator, and he'll give you a tour of the campus. Most likely, they're going to try to pair you up with some kids who are already committed. They're likely going to give you a student host as well, who's on the team, and somebody who's going to speak well of the team. You're going to have a meeting with academics. And if you don't know what you want to study, and that's the case for a lot of these kids, and that's fine because they're in high school, they're going to show you a couple different academic advisors who might be able to help you out. They'll probably show you their academic tutoring center, the weight room, the indoor practice facility. You're going to get a tour of the stadium, and you're going to get to meet all the coaches. The schools that emphasize family a lot are going to have you meet a lot of people within the building to really emphasize, hey, this is, first name basis, this guy and this girl and that guy and all that. If you're on campus for a game, you're going to get to go to the game. You'll sit in a section with other top recruits. Oftentimes you will go out to dinner with the other recruits on campus, and that's generally either at a restaurant or at the coach's home. Sometimes both. Maybe they'll go cookies or something at the coach's house afterwards. You'll oftentimes stay either at a hotel or with one of the players, and then they will take you out and kind of show you the nightlife. That's a part that I think does matter more than maybe the casual fan recognizes. And then you'll generally have breakfast on the Sunday morning when you leave with the head coach, and he's going to put the not the hard sell, but he's going to let you know, hey, we want to have you as part of our program, and we really think you can help us in these ways, and we love to grow with you, and blah blah blah. And everybody have a safe trip back. Text me when you get back, and that kind of wraps it up.
Oh, and an important note from someone who would know about official visits:
send a kid on a visit with a parent or with the uncle or with someone, because I've seen it over and over again. They put them in a room and they drill them. The kid comes out the room committed, gets on the plane, goes home. Next week he's decommitted. It's a bad look, because now that's telling everybody in the whole world that you can't commit to something.
These coaches, man, they are cooking up quite a scheme, aren't they?
Yup.
Leon, he got his first offer from Vanderbilt as an 8th grader. Wow. So they really recruited him for like 5 years. So we thought he was going there, but he changed his mind and he picked USC.
When coaches see a potential target, they act. College football fans will remember the story of Lane Kiffin offering a scholarship to a 13-year-old quarterback from Delaware. It doesn't start that early for everyone, but it's a tiring process. Back to Brandon.
I think it's really the spring of their junior year where you start to see guys, especially the ones that have really blown up during that offseason. I think that's when they go from, hey, this is a lot of fun to, my gosh, this is draining. And it really ramps up into the summer when you have some of the big national showcase events. And then eventually into the fall when you go on an official visit and you got all these college-age kids and the fans at the school rooting for you saying, hey, come here, we want to take a picture with you. That attention's still great, but it's the constant calls from the coaches. It's the constant text messages from the coaches, the media wanting to know where they're going. And I think by the time they get around to their senior season, they're just completely done with the recruiting process, which is why I think you're seeing guys make earlier commitments, why you're seeing guys being more willing to graduate early, because the sooner they can put that part of the picture out and just focus on being a college football player, I think these guys are part of this generation now that they just want to get this over with because the attention is so overwhelming.
I remember I was terrified, Dan, when I made my college selection. I went to Penn State ultimately because I knew the most people there, and I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do when I grew up.
That seems reasonable, Ty. That seems very normal. I went to Oregon. I wanted to stay on the West Coast. I was pretty sure I wanted to do journalism, broadcast journalism, production kind of thing. Didn't really want to stay in LA. Went to Eugene. Liked it. Seemed nice. Seemed like I could make a home there. So that's where I went.
You also saw it before the cold, rainy weather came in, right?
I was conned, Ty. I was conned.
Here's the thing, though. We both made our college selections without the spotlight of recruiting media, or any media for that matter, breathing down our necks. We didn't have a potential multi-million-dollar career.
Speak for yourself.
At least not on the football field. We didn't have nearly the degree of pressure that so many of these recruits have to deal with.
That's true. It was just thinking about ourselves, and that's it.
We talked to Lindsey about the toll that added pressure takes on recruits.
So highly recruited kids, it's really kind of hard to just simplify that, just because some kids handle it really, really well. Who these kids who are receiving all this attention from all these coaches, all these reporters. Some of the kids, they're very young. They're like, we're calling them kids because they're still kids. And some of them had a hard time handling all the attention because it's so much. And it's weird because, we're talking to 16 and 17-year-olds and they're receiving, an offensive lineman's receiving a ton of attention, like long before, or way more than they'd ever receive, as an offensive lineman once they get to college.
Here's the gist. Some kids deal with it better than others. Some will get it over with and move on to a new normal or whatever. Some will basically harvest as much social media attention as they possibly can get.
My sense is the attention is both a blessing and a curse, because on one hand, it really can spotlight kids from smaller schools that wouldn't otherwise be on the radar. But on the other hand, when you get fan bases all ginned up like this, it's not always a great result. Here is one story we got from a former blue chip recruit.
But I remember I went up to Ohio State my junior year, and it was the Ohio State versus Michigan game. And I remember I was walking, I had my Ohio State stuff on because it was at Ohio State. And some Michigan fan just came up to me, just yelling, and I had a hot dog in my hand. He slapped the hot dog out of my hand. And the recruiting lady, we was just looking at each other like, what just happened? You feel me?
Is it any wonder that so many of these kids just want to get it all over with? Dan, recruiting is a complex, exciting, dizzying, sometimes monetized process. Let's chat again with our friend Leon McQuay II. He says, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be.
You see all of these offers, but you should start cutting those offers down as time goes on, depending on, when you're actually going to make a decision. You're going to have to make a decision. And that's something that I talked to with Leon. He had 40-plus offers, man, and it's like, how do you decide between 40? You cut them down. Mm-hmm. You put in the work, and it is work. It's work, from the parent standpoint and from the kid standpoint, because you got all of these coaches calling. Why are you trying to do your homework? Why are you trying to complete papers? That doesn't stop. You know what I'm saying? So, just witnessing, the amount of stress that's put on these kids, you want to make it easy for them. Start eliminating, start cutting down. But that's the thing. Most kids now, they love the attention. They love the attention. And once you start cutting schools down, mm-hmm. You don't garner that attention anymore. So, and that's all, again, in structure and having someone there to explain why you don't do this or why you do this. And again, it's a big process. It's a lot that goes with it.
Narrow down that field.
Pick the best school for you, and not necessarily pick the best school in terms of, hey, this is the largest name that has offered me. So often we see kids make a switch, and you're kind of like, I guess that is a better school than the school to which you're previously committed, or maybe the school we expect you to go to. But on the flip side, that's not a good fit for you. You pick the school that fits your talents, that fits your personality, that fits what you want to do academically, not just the biggest name. I think that's a real key.
Narrow down that field.
Yeah, I just wish that kids would stop worrying about the number of offers they have. It's like a competition just to get offers. Like, if you get the offer you want or you don't have the offer you want, just keep working. And it's not a game of like, let me see if I can get 30 offers. Like, hone in on the schools you're interested in or you think you have the ability to play at. And it's fun to be competitive. We're all competitive, but it's this like sick game of offers. And there's so many kids out there who don't have a single offer, who are more than worthy. But it's just this, game of how many offers can Bobby get? And I just wish that people would focus more on like, okay, we got the offers we want. Like, we'll let the other schools know and go from here versus making it this drawn out game and this whole thing. But I think that's also part of the media's fault. I mean, the media has made this such a bigger monster, with all these kids than it ever probably dreamt of being. But I just wish that recruits and their parents would focus on the schools they want. Okay, you get those offers and now start moving on with your life versus just almost being greedy and asking for so many more.
Plain and simple. Go where you want to go. Don't waste your time seeking approval and make a good decision.
He could have played football anywhere, but that was where he wanted to go. So you raise your kids to be independent, and he got out of it what he wanted. And with that being said, I'm happy. I didn't like the flights. I definitely didn't like the flights. But, hey, he got out of it what he wanted.
So keep this in mind. These are humans, just like us, struggling with the biggest decisions of their lives. And no, they might not always handle it perfectly, but you wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. Our advice? Just be cool.
This has been a special production from The Solid Verbal. Special thanks to Bud Elliott from SB Nation, Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports, Lindsey Theory from the LA Times, Leon McQuay II from Tampa, Florida, and as always, Bill Hancock.
NPR is able to bring these types of stories because of listeners like you.